All right. All you're going to hear is AIA. We in here. All right, guys. Welcome to the show. This is the AIA Above It All Arts and Media podcast. Today I have a special guest. It goes by the name Dale Swift. He's been a police officer for 15 years. And it's amazing. I like to start off the show with a quote of the day. And at the end of the show, I'll let you do the quote of the day just so, you know, it feels more homegrown. So my quote of the day today is, you often get criticized by people doing less than you. So with that being said, I want everybody to, give a warming welcome to Dale. I'm happy to have you here. For an introduction, like, tell us how we met.
So we were at I guess the CPU office at Yorkdale. Right?
Yeah.
And
Which I didn't even know how the police headquarters up there.
yeah, neither did I until that day. So, and it was, the whole idea was for us to meet to do an event called iMpact, right?
Yeah.
But Farley Flex was our go-between.
Yeah.
So Farley Flex pretty much was like our mediator.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like he was a mediator like I was somewhere else. Like he was literally the mediator in the room. So he wanted me to meet King, and we're talking, but I literally had to talk to Farley for King to respond. So after our meeting that went really well in regards to what we wanted to do with this thing, I was like, okay, so King, like, so how do I get in contact with you to kind of talk about the stuff? He's like, yeah, call Farley. Farley will call me.
Yeah.
And I'll call Farley, and then Farley will call you. And I was like, okay. So we started off really, like, I was really trying, and he was really not.
True story.
But from there, I don't know, man. It just really grew very organically. Like, I think I saw you for who you were, and you legit saw me for who I was, and ever since then, we just bug each other.
No, it's absolutely right. And Dale's actually one of the few cops I actually took a liking to because, my story, coming out from incarceration and being dealt like a tough hand very early at age, it's very hard to open up to a police officer because you see the badge before you see the person. And for me, like, now I actually get to see the person before I see the badge, which is very important. So, like, what made you want to become a police officer?
It was what made me want to become a police officer was my cousin, actually. So my cousin, Grayson Shillingford, he's a detective in Richmond Hill 2 District for York. Mm-hmm. And at the time, he was at Peel. And this was in, I'd say, 2006, 2007. And I was working with youth with severe mental health issues at the time, just with various organizations, right? Just trying to pay off, like, student debts.
Oh, Lord, we
right?
don't know those.
So he calls me while I was working. He's like, hey, I'm thinking of applying for the police. And I'm like, why? Right? He's like, no. He's like, it's good. There's benefits. It's good pay. And I'm like, you're from Rexdale and I'm from Chester Lee.
Yeah.
And you're telling me your career choice is policing?
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, we don't look like cops, right? And he's like, no, it's changing. They're looking for people who have good communication skills that look like us. And I'm like, oh. Now, realistically, if anyone else asked me to do this, I'd say no. But my cousin was like my big brother, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he had played professional football in the States and finished off his career in the CFL and whatever. And I would say at the most pivotal time when I was in Chester Lee, where I literally could have went any way, he just showed up again after one of his training camps and really took me under his belt to hang out with his friends, who were a great influence, and kind of kept me away from a lot of the ins and outs of Chester Lee, what was going on back then, because it was bumping in the 90s. Like, there was a lot of stuff every day. So I always looked up for him. So I'm like, if he's saying this is a good idea, let me try it out. So I was, and this was a time where I was like thinking about family and security. And with the job I had now, there was no benefits. There was no.
Like, what was that job?
So I worked for a company called the Griffin Center, which worked with dual diagnosis kids. So they have like a mental health condition as well as like a developmental issue as well. And then then after that, I worked with Lawler Support Services, which dealt with people who had like severe brain injuries. Great organizations, but it's just like if you take vacation, it's on your time.
Oh wow.
Right, so it's all so you have to like build up a nest to
Yeah.
take vacation and figure out that time, right? So if you're not working, you're not getting paid. And I mean, as much as I loved the job and was really passionate about it, I'm like, I don't know how sustainable that was. So when he said this and he talked about benefits, days off, he's like, you'll actually be working less, because I was literally working like every day.
Oh, man.
I was like, this sounds great. So
Work
so
less,
said-
get paid more.
So, yeah. So I was like, I was all over this. Now, mind you, those two jobs helped me pay off $45,000 in student debts in a year and a half. So you can,
That's
I was
amazing,
sleeping
yeah.
2 hours a day, dude. I was like, I would go to work, sleep in my car for 2 hours,
and then go to
that was it, right? It was a grind, right?
Yeah.
Because I had no one else to do it for me. So then I went through Peel, didn't get on with Peel. I think I messed up in the test. I can't remember much about it. Then I went to York, and York was all over it. Like I handed in my resume, and before I left, she's like, wait, can we talk to you? So I went to York, and you know what? It was a great experience. My recruiter there, Lisa Boone, she was absolutely fantastic. But it didn't work out we're still trying to figure out why it didn't work out. But at the end of the day, even though it didn't work out, she was so confident about me being a police officer. She actually took my file to Toronto Police and said, you guys need to look at this guy.
That's amazing.
Right? Like, how often does that happen? Right? So
Never.
she took it, never, right? So, and I didn't ask her to or whatever, but she knew I was pretty down on myself for not getting through the process and not really understanding why, right? So she brought it to Toronto, and Toronto interviewed me, and here I am now.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So-
So how was your training and schooling?
Before policing or?
No, like to get into like policing, like before and after. Like, what would you say? Like,
I would say so. I took psychology in university. I still have to finish like a credit and a half, but it's just funny time. But I did that, and then after that, I did a social service worker intensive course in Ottawa at Algonquin, and then finished most of my degree through Carleton with psychology, like the stuff that I had missed or didn't do too well on. Finished that up. So I would say that was my training just for the more mental health and whatever, which when you deal with people with mental health and youth with mental health and like severe, like that's where your communication skills come in, right? Because sometimes you don't get the best training. You got to figure stuff out on your own, and you have to be able to communicate. So I would say my communication skills came from those work environments where you really had yourself to figure stuff out. To the point where when I came to policing, I was like, this is easy. I'm like, I have all these different resources and supports and so on and so forth. I felt it was easier communicating with people. Whereas before, like if I said the wrong thing, did the wrong gesture, had the wrong trigger, it was a bad day, right? So I would say for training, I liked the courses and stuff I did just because it helped with communication and understanding people more.
how was the training? Like, were the training people like pretty cool? Like,
So in OPC, so it was interesting. So in OPC and police in Toronto, so you go, first we were in Toronto for, I can't remember if it was like 6 weeks or so, where they kind of taught us how they police, right? Because every service is going to police different under the same rules, but the dynamics are so different, right? So they teach you how this is in Toronto, what we do in Toronto, what works, what doesn't work. Then you go to OPC where you've got, oh my gosh, like 1,000 other officers, all training from all over Ontario.
That's wild.
And they keep it more general in regards to knowing your criminal code, knowing your provincial stats and all that stuff. So you're learning more of the procedural stuff. And then you're going through like different scenarios and whatever. It's good because we had people who were really, I would say, passionate about it, like really passionate about it. So they would show you how to do certain dynamic things and whatever. But it was a bit grueling. But the ironic thing was when I got there, and I was 32 when I was there, right?
Jeez.
So I had lived life. Everyone's like, let's go out. I'm like, nope. I was in my bed watching like old school British comedy and then going to bed and then waking up and then going through the whole process. But I was exhausted when I was there. So like I would literally fall asleep in classes.
Oh, wow.
And because I was so tired from working all the time in my other jobs, right?
Yeah.
So, ironically enough, I'm in class and they're trying to pick valedictorian, right? And I'm
Dale's like,
yeah. So I'm like, what's going on? Whatever,
one
whatever.
sheep, two sheep.
Right. But the great thing is I did actually have a good conversation with a lot of my profs or teachers, right? Just said, look, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just literally exhausted from all this stuff. And they were good, right? I did well. I didn't get like 100 or 90%, but I was definitely in the 80s somewhere.
That's good.
Right? So when they heard about the valedictorian coming up, they're like, Swift, you should go for it. I'm like, dude, I'm asleep. Like, I ask you for your notes after.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But he was like, no, because you're so you're personable and you talk, you make people laugh, whatever. So then I said no. Then I found out York people were going for it and Peel people were going for it. I'm like, well, you're gonged me, man. So I'm like, I'm going for this. Right? So the second I found out who was going, and York had I think 2 or 3 people at the time, right? So I just wanted to beat them. That's beer fact. I just wanted to beat them.
Jordan effect.
That was it. And I went out there and I did. And I came valedictorian. And what was first just like something that I just wanted to see if I would do it, I actually took a lot of pride in that after and really enjoyed creating that speech to give to everyone based on my experiences as a new cadet. And it was a great experience. So overall, OPC was a great experience. Met some new friends, met some good friends I still keep in contact with that are like all over Ontario.
That's amazing.
And then we come back to Toronto and they pretty much tell you that, so I'm glad you guys learned all this stuff there, but this is how we do it here. So it's like they retrain you how to do things specifically for the situations that we see on a regular basis because every service is different. So if the scenarios were showing you deal with it one way at OPC, Toronto's like, that's good, not saying that's wrong, but based on what we see on a regular basis, this is how we like to deal with stuff, so on and so forth. So that was pretty much the training.
So when you first got into your career, like what was your goal as a black police officer?
My big thing was, and I think it helped being 32, was just to remain who I was, right? I didn't realize how difficult that was going to be at first. But I was always community-based. Like that's how I was before policing. That's how I was in high school, college, university. So my whole thing was it's got to be community-based, right? I gotta be something different. To see something different, you gotta do something different, right? So coming from Chesterlee and also spending a lot of time in Rexdale and seeing, good experiences with police officers and not so good experiences with police officers and experience that for myself. I'm like, okay, so I've got to be the difference here and do something about this internally, however I can. So my focus from the second I signed the papers to 15 years in has always been community. For me, it's purpose over promotion. Because it's like, oh, you should try sergeant and so on and so forth. I'm like, you know what? If I feel like I'm doing a good job here, that's what I'm about. If I can put my head down at night and say, I did my best working and not working, because I'm always on, right?
Yeah.
Dealing with youth especially. That's all I care about. Promotions will come when it comes, but right now it's putting in, you have to have individuals through that grind work, right? That's willing to put more of themselves into situations to make a better situation and make better relationships between police officers and community.
But do you see because as a black man in uniform, especially coming from Chesterlee, do you feel like the community has, sometimes when you first got in, been like, yo, this guy's a traitor. Like, this guy grew up with us. And now he's part of the gang, bro?
Yeah, it was...
you flipped on us, B.
So it was hard, right? And I had a feeling it was going to be something like that, but it was actually pretty bad. It was bad in the sense that being a black officer, being from where I was, right? The idea of police in your neighborhood is just not always something that's accepted. Right?
Yeah, it's
shoot,
oh,
come on,
Dale's coming. Yo, put the split away.
But what I did notice was if I went into a community and they just did not, and them not knowing where I'm from, I could be with a white officer and a whole bunch of other people, and the white officer could be talking, and the community member's just looking at me.
Right? Yo, you gonna let this go on?
And he's saying all this stuff, and that's exactly what it was. He's like, okay, so I see what this guy's saying. What are you gonna do about this?
Yeah.
And you'd get really uncomfortable because you just because there were some circumstances I'm like, this is dumb. Why why are we here? Like, why are we talking to a guy playing dominoes and drinking outside of his house or outside at Nicey's and like, he's not bugging anyone, right? So when we're talking and he's looking at me, it's actually very difficult, right? But I think what you do is you because I expected it, I really just tried to stay calm, tried to talk calm. I'm like, or I'd be like, guys, I can't do this. I'm not doing this, right?
Yeah.
So the problem with being a black officer is that when you get on, it's very different for black officers, I think. And this is just me talking from my experience. I don't know how anyone else's experience is, but you are trying to gain the respect from both sides. So you come into policing trying to prove to other officers that don't look like you that you're game, you're a team player, and all that stuff. So like you're solid, right? That's the word. You're solid. But you're also trying to prove to the neighborhood that you're going to be going into that you're the same thing. So we're in the middle trying to find that balance. And that balance gets teetered. If I'm talking too much to certain communities, officers go like, "What's going on?
Yeah.
How close is Swift with the community, right?"
It's
And then-
in with the
And if I'm interacting more with police officers and they don't see me in the communities, they're like, "Swift, well, we saw Swift all the time. Like, how come we're not seeing him now?" So it's always a balancing act, because I think a lot of people forget that like black officers or ethnic officers or people who come from different countries or what have you, when they come into policing in their background isn't always something good.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like you say, you're working for the Mandem, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, well, so you lost your cousin, you lost your friends, sometimes you lose your parents. It's not something that is celebrated, right? Where I would say I've seen more with our white counterparts or more Canadian individuals when they say they're coming police officers. It's celebrated.
Yeah, exactly.
But we get what? Why?
It's like, what?
What are you doing? Right?
Couldn't become a firefighter?
Yeah, like why not a firefighter? Like why a police officer? So so you have that stress there. You have the stress of trying to prove yourself to them, and like I said, you're in the middle. And I know coming into as a police officer, it's always like you hope you get a position and people think you're solid enough to go whatever. And I'll see sometimes my white counterparts that aren't hoping. When they come in, it's like, I know I'm getting a spot because of whatever, so on and so forth. So that's the difference. A lot of us are hoping to get a spot, and sometimes you see other individuals that they just automatically feel as if they're going to get a spot, right? So I find we navigate very differently. And even when I got on, like I had a lot of like black officers talk to me, but it was almost like it was always in secret.
Yeah, it's like,
right? They're like, "Yeah, no, I got you, but just don't
say anything.
Don't say anything. Don't be too high. Don't be too don't get noticed too much." And I'm like, I have never been in a situation where I don't like to be noticed. Like I like you're telling me to kind of dumb it down,
under the radar,
fly under the radar. That was a fly under the radar. But they were only telling this to certain officers.
Yeah, it's like, don't worry, you're gonna go far, but
just you gotta play the game. You gotta drink the
game,
Kool-Aid and just whatever. But I got you.
Yeah.
Right. So it was very interesting at first, but I did question it at first. Like, was this the right thing for me to do? And I almost left.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I almost left. And that was after my first year. I was just like, I met great officers. Like, there are great officers, but there was stuff that I was seeing where I was just like, I don't know if this is for me.
Like, okay, so with the stuff that you were seeing that almost made you leave, like, was there ever a time where you had to call out an officer and be like, "Yo, what you're doing is not policing"?
Oh yeah, and you get enemies very quickly at that point. Like, because sometimes the idea is that not the heavy-handed, but the heavy-worded or the loudest officers are the ones people want to follow because they're like the top dog kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But you'll see them deal with people, degrade people, talk down to them, and it would disgust me. And at first, I would kind of just shy away from it or not try to be a part of it. But then as I got time on and I was like, no, this is not right, I'd be like, no, you know what? You need to pull away. I'll talk over, or I'll pull them out of their vest and I'll be like, all right, I'll take over in this because this is going to go nowhere. And it's a safety thing too. If you bring officers in that are amping up people, it makes a safety a big issue for everybody after that, right? Because sometimes some of the people you're dealing with, it's all they have is their pride. So you break their pride, you're done. They don't care if you're a cop or not, right? So that's where the whole communication skills come in. And I've had to like pull an officer aside and talk to them and be like, this is not how you talk to people. I said, out of uniform, would you talk to that person the same way? No, that's stupid.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so why do you feel with the uniform on that you feel that you can talk to people like that, or you think that you're better than them, right? And there's a lot of people we meet. Typically, when we meet them, it's on their worst day. It's on their, things aren't going well. We've all had that. Cops have it too. There are guys I've arrested that I know are better individuals than cops.
Yeah.
And vice versa. And that's just a fact, right? Like, it's not human beings. These are human beings in positions of authority. Remember, it's human beings that are doing these jobs and stuff like that. So obviously there are going to be people who, aren't always up to par.
Yeah, and like that, like and that's the thing that scares me about certain police officers, because they have like this notion and fear of people that don't look like them. Like it's trigger first and then ask questions later. Like, it's not like, you see how you attack a situation by actually, trying to, de-escalate it and try to just reason with the person. The encounters I had with police officers are like, hey, you fit the description, hands on the car. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, do you think this is going to actually, like, help you guys? Like,
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy because, the over-policing of, how, the black community has been policed under different mayors is just, it was just wild for the longest time. Like, and I remember even growing up as a kid when they had carding. Like, that to me was like, are you guys trying to practice apartheid in Canada? like, are you kidding me? Yeah. But they don't talk about the effects it has on a young child growing up, walking to the ball court and you get carded like 3 or 4 times before you even make it to the ball court. And I think, like, as a human being, like, that does something to you. It almost makes you seem like you're less of who you are as a person, And I was happy when they finally took carding away. But I knew when I was working construction, you would have these, pricks that would be like, oh, they took away carding, gun violence is going to go up. And I had to tell them, like, you guys think that's okay?
That's the tough one too, because it's like, I think with the carding stuff, I think what happened was obviously there are officers who abused it.
Oh, 100%.
Right? And there were officers who abused it. And the problem with that situation is that, unfortunately, those are the officers that we tend to focus on. Where there was a lot of officers who didn't agree with carding, there was a lot of officers who just didn't agree with a lot of certain things that was going on. And I think most of our service has those officers in it. And I think a lot of those officers, being white, black, whatever you are, feel like they have more of a voice now, where they can say when things are wrong. They're realizing this, there's just investigate properly, right? Like, do a proper investigation, right? Did carding make it easy sometimes? I'm sure a lot of people would say yes, it did, but it also was extremely destructive to any individuals we did have contact with, because now we're in the system. And usually when you're in the system, it's not for something good. It's not like you have like a a good resident report, right?
Yeah,
like,
he was walking.
He was amazing.
Yeah,
just bought me a coffee. Like, we don't have those, right? So anything you see in the system typically is something bad. And what I try to tell a lot of our youth is that a youth coming into policing is that you cannot depend on our system to tell you who an individual is, because you have to understand that whatever's in there is not going to be something good, and that there's more of a story to this person. And you have to be willing to look into that and accept that and look at the bigger picture besides what's just in front of you, right? And that's the thing too, like, and people don't realize this, the really good cops don't like the bad cops. We don't mesh. Like, I don't like idiot cops. Idiot cops don't like me.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's like in any massive organization, you're going to have people who are doing it for certain reasons, for the right reasons, and other people that are doing it for selfish reasons, right? That's just the way it is. That's the nature of the beast in anything big. And I think the problem is, I think Toronto could do a better job of really highlighting officers that are grinding, that are doing the right stuff, instead of focusing on the ones that aren't.
Yeah, because I remember being with the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit and telling them, like, hey, if we want, policing to be better, why don't we just highlight the cops that are doing better police work? Why don't we give them an award? Like, that to me, turns the narrative and actually turns the eye and shows the other people, like, oh, wait up, if I do something good, I'll get highlighted. Human nature, people are very selfish. They'll start doing good just for the, like, I get a spotlight? What?
Yeah.
Well,
I think a lot of it too is, and I think this was the history of policing, is that it was very numbers driven, right? So if you get a lot of tickets, you're doing well. If you are pulling a lot of people over, you're doing well. If you're getting a lot of arrests, you're doing well. If you're putting in a lot of reports, you're doing well. And the problem is that all of those numbers is not a good indicator of a good police officer, right? And people start, like officers start thriving for those numbers to get noticed, like you said. They want to get noticed, right? But then usually that's at the expense of the community, right? Where we want to get our numbers up, so we start interacting with everyone to get all of our numbers up, right? And to me, that's not good policing. I think that's over. I think that's over policing. I think Toronto, and I can only speak for Toronto, but I think they're trying to. They realize that, and they're like, how else can we define what a good officer is? And now it's like, well, how is this officer with their communication with other people? How are they with building relationships? How are they? Are they trying to mentor and influence other officers coming in to be the same way? Like, are they showing that mentorship? Are they doing? Is that the stuff that they're doing? Now, mind you, that's hard to. You can't put numbers on that. So that's why it's up to your supervisors and your superiors to recognize that no, this officer is doing well because of this is the stuff that I see and this is the stuff that I hear from his supervisors. That I think makes a good officer. If you can see, I think people have to really understand this. What makes a good officer is like when you hear about, oh, that's unprofessional. Like everything's unprofessional. This is unprofessional. You can't dance, it's unprofessional. You can't smile or make a joke with something that's unprofessional. The thing people have to understand, I think our service has to understand, or services have to understand, is professionalism is based on circumstance, right? So professionalism can be you have a victim of, say, a violent crime or any kind of crime, someone who's been hurt by this aspect of this situation. So professionalism is you being there, you being focused, you running a proper investigation, you're doing everything to get all the facts. Really trying to figure out how you can help this victim through this process and help everyone else that's been affected by this process. That's professionalism in that aspect. Another aspect of professionalism is if your community asks you or officers to go to an event, you sitting with your friends or in a corner with the rest of your police buddies, like this and not really interacting, that to me is unprofessionalism, right? If a community is saying, we want you to show up to our event so you can be a part of us. You literally have to be a part of them. So does that mean you're dancing? Sure. I love to dance, straight up, 100%. Does that mean that you are talking with various individuals in the community? Of course. Trying the food, making jokes, talking like you're not in your uniform. That's why they want us at these events. They don't need us to police it usually. We're trying to bridge that gap, but you've got to meet us halfway too, and you've got to show us that human side of yourself, right? So to me, interacting with the community, that is professionalism. Professionalism is not you sticking with what you know with individuals and staying out of the event and just kind of saying you were just there, right? Or just taking a random picture with someone and disappearing again. That is not professionalism. So professionalism is based on circumstances. And I think a good officer can recognize what is needed for what situation. Does that make sense?
No, it does. There's another question I wanted to, over the years, what is have you seen changes in community from when you first started to now? Whether it's mental health or...
I would say our understanding of mental health is way better than it was before when I came on. And I came from a mental health background, right? So I saw the minimal training a lot of officers had in regards to mental health, and no fault of their own. They don't know what they're dealing with, right? So typically there'll be either jokes or they just don't have the tools to deal with people with mental health. So I would say people with mental health would typically get forgotten, right? Or ostracized. I would say in the last 15 years, I can say that the attempts to understand mental health more and the effects of mental health and how people get mental health issues and so on and so forth, and understanding the different resources out there, I think we've really embraced. And we can always do a better job, right? and once again, in any organization, you have people who are tied into it and agree like, yes, I want to do this better with these resources. And there are some individuals who just don't care. And it's just another training exercise, or like, oh, they're giving something else because we're not doing something right. And that's their attitude, right? So if you want to be a better officer, you literally have to change with the time, which means you have to get educated on your social aspects, your interactions, what's affecting people. If you know that stuff, when you're investigating anything, it helps you because you have that background and you deal with it appropriately, right? So I do think it's getting better.
So how do you go into a situation, like, I don't know, maybe you have or haven't been in a situation where the person that you're trying to like, de-escalate the situation has a mental health issue?
Well, I think it was easier for me. And I remember years ago, one of my sergeants would call me the mental health whisperer. He'd be like, this situation is too much for me. Someone call Swift. And you'd come in, like I would come in, and once again, it's seeing how possibly far gone the person is. Like, are they violent towards themselves? Then obviously you have to react really quickly and get them restrained as easy as you possibly can. And sometimes when people are going through a psychotic episode, like the strength. So sometimes when you see officers, like 3, 4, 5 officers, it literally takes 3, 4, 5 officers my size to get someone under control without trying to hurt them, right? So it's with me, it's assessing what's going on. Like, what was the trigger? What happened before this? Is this person on meds? Are they off their meds now? What are their support systems? What's their week been like? So it's all these things information I try to get before interacting with that person, so I have something to go with when I talk to this individual. Most times you can talk people down and you can get them to kind of follow your instructions and probably go to the hospital to get assessed or start taking their medication again or get formed, which means they stay there for an assessment for 72 hours. And it's the rare time where they're so far gone, you have to kind of jump in and act immediately, because it's more if you're concerned about their medical health, or because their heart could be racing and you're like, we need to get them assessed by ambulance really, really soon. For instance, I was on a pay duty in the taste of, oh my gosh, Bloor. It was like far, okay. And there was this light-skinned black guy with just his jeans screaming, like, just, if I show you the video, it'd be like, how do you stay, like, yelling in my face and kind of going all over the place, throwing his stuff, throwing his food, throwing his phone. And it's easy for us to just go grab him and kind of take him, whatever. But all we did, and I was glad my other officers were like the same, and they were younger than I were, we just kept trying to talk to him, engage him, keep that eye contact. You have one person talking to this person, not everybody.
Not everybody.
No, exactly. That never works. You have one person talking to this individual, and sometimes it takes a long time.
Yeah.
But you have to put in that time if you want it to go well. And despite how high this individual was, what I mean by high is that how his like episode was his episode was so high, we were able to bring it down, and then the ambulance came and they were able to actually transport him to the hospital. So when dealing with mental health, you have to have patience. You have to have patience. It can't be just about like, oh, I'm supposed to be leaving in 5 minutes, my shift is done. Like, if you react too fast, your shift is gonna go long either way, right? If you deal with it well or if you don't deal with it well. So it's that patient aspect and that empathizing, because a lot of these individuals didn't choose to be this way. And that's the other thing you have to realize as well. It's very easy for us to say, well, why are you like that? Stop, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But mental health doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. And like, just thinking about it, it's pretty crazy because a lot of people nowadays are suffering even more from mental health than
a lot of youth
before. Exactly. Like, like everywhere you go, I have this, and it's like, whoa. Like, when I was growing up, maybe like 1 in every 1,000 people had a mental health problem. Now it's more rampant than ever. Everybody has phobias of this or fear of that.
I find, and that's true. And I find, especially if you look at a lot of our black youth, and I'd say our black males, they would grow up in an environment where it was very like, you didn't talk about mental health. You sucked it up. Like, if you had a problem, you deal with it. Mental health was an excuse. right? You're either lazy or whatever. So a lot of these youth would have a very hard time talking about their experiences or what they're feeling. And some of them have a lot of PTSD just based on the stuff that they've seen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But the PTSD that was caused by situations that they were in does look a lot like your typical teenager, where they're being antisocial or they're sleeping in or there's no motivation. So we can just say that's them being lazy teens, not realizing that they probably experienced some stuff that we don't even know about and they just can't put it together. So it's PTSD that looks like your typical teenage behavior, but they are actually struggling in silence. So I will talk about like mental health with me, and I will say that, I'm pretty sure I was depressed in my second year of university, and I come from a background where my mom has severe mental health, and I had to move out when I was 17. And I tell the youth my struggles with like bulimia. I was bulimic for years, man. Like
You?
yeah,
Yo,
I was
what?
I was bulimic for years, and this is when I was like training really hard. Like it was like I felt like I had to be a certain weight like when I was playing basketball, and I only started dealing with my bulimia actually got dealt with, I'd say late 20s, early 30s, and I'm 47.
Jesus
right?
Christ.
But
Black don't crack, people.
right? But you think about it, right? Like how many people are going to say that?
No, exactly.
So I'm like, if I expect someone else to be vulnerable to me and I expect them to open up to me, I'm like, I've got to start that conversation first. So I tell them who I am. So they see the 6'4" black officer who's 230, whatever, blah, 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 positive, whatever. I'm like, yeah, but I had my issues too. Like from when I grew up, and I had this weird, this body image thing growing up, and like, your family would call you fat or whatever, and this and that. So I started doing things to make sure I wasn't. And when kids hear that, then they're like, okay, so we're not that different. And then they open up. But I've got to be vulnerable first. So I always call it strength from vulnerability, right? It's so much easier to hold things in, and we call that strength.
Yeah,
And you know
exactly.
what I mean? It's so
Suffering in silence.
yeah, that's strength, right? When you think about it, that the vulnerability, when you put yourself out there, you don't know how people are going to react to it. You don't know how people are going to take you. You don't know if they're going to judge you. That takes strength. So showing your true colors and showing that you did suffer and that you're having a hard time, that shows a lot of strength, because you can't control the outcome that's going to happen to you. So I recognize that, and I make sure I am who I say I am to a lot of these youth, so they can be like, wow, okay, so here's a person that we think has it all together that had to struggle and go through his stuff to get to where he is.
Oh, that's
right.
That's pretty wild, because I did not know.
No,
I have no
it's
idea that you even struggled with that. Like,
I struggled with a lot of stuff, man. Like it was not easy. Like especially having a mom who I'm pretty sure was bipolar. Like I went into psychology at Trent to literally figure out like what was going on with her. And the hard part is that she'd go to church. I think she changed her religion every 2 months.
oh Lord.
Yeah. and every
Pastor's
time,
like, yo, this offering basket looking pretty empty.
right. And
Where's Mr. Swift?
But
Miss Swift, like, what is happening here?
she's like, next. But it was sad, because like she would come home from church, and that's when she would be the most violent.
Oh wow.
Like my mom had like a whole bunch of rings and stuff like that, and she would hold me by, like I remember she pulled me by my ear from my room because there was a Tupperware cover not on the Tupperware that was clean. And I would go to ask her like, why is she, and then she would punch me, right? And my mom would wear all these rings. She'd had all gold rings.
Unity,
Yeah, 100%, right? And it got
man.
to the point where she would hit me so hard, I'd go like this, so she'd hit my teeth, because all here was messed right up. I still have scars in my mouth because of those situations. And that happened on a regular basis. But because I played basketball, I'd be like, oh no, I just got an elbow to the face or whatever,
yeah.
and so on and so forth. And like, oh, okay, right? So I talk about all those struggles, and that's why I moved out when I was 17, and I had to figure it out on my own, right? But as much as you're figuring out on your own, like there is no way I would be where I am right now if it wasn't for significant individuals that had nothing to do with my family.
So like mentors, basically.
Mentors, teachers were a huge thing. Coaches were a huge thing. Cousins, like my cousin, huge. So as much as I wasn't close to my immediate family, my extended family was fantastic, right? And counseling. I had to go for counseling. My mom messed me up so much that I had to go to a counselor and a priest.
Jesus Christ.
Because my mom would do this thing where I would stay in the basement, and she would crawl down the stairs Like not even
Exorcist,
like,
bro. What?
I
Yo.
swear on my child, she would crawl downstairs screaming, doing like verbs from the Bible, and I'd be sitting on my bed like, oh my God, here we go.
Oh,
And she
Lord.
would crawl in front of me, and she'd be like damning me to God, and she would take out her
Oh.
fake eye and she would throw it at
Oh,
me.
my
Dude, like this is the
goodness.
stuff that
Oh.
legit I was going
That's
through.
haunting.
And I would just be like, and I had nightmares. I would have these nightmares of
Of course.
this woman
Like-
with this crazy hair and a white gown, and it was my mom, and I had that for years, bro. So I had to go talk to a priest because a lot of what my mom did was use religion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah, like you know,
Same
you
in
have to be.
African households.
Like
Hey, the Bible says this, huh? You got to do this way, huh? Do not stray from the word of Christ.
I can chop off your arm.
Yeah,
You still
right?
have to be loyal. And I'm like, and it's so you develop this distorted loyalty to your parents based on how they use religion against you,
Oh,
right? And I'm
man.
like, God's got to have a problem.
Yeah,
with this, right?
exactly.
Like, so it was priest and psychologists that I use, and I still talk to a psychologist now just to make sure everything is good, just the check-ins, man. Like that's, and I would tell anyone getting onto this job, the first thing you do is you make sure you have a good counselor or a psychologist that you can talk to, just to check in,
No, that.
just to check in.
But like, was there any point in time like you reached out to your dad or anything? Or?
Oh, so my dad. Okay. So my dad's a very sad situation because, so I was an unplanned pregnancy.
So was I. So.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Look
like-
at us. Look at us.
Yeah, no,
We're the ones doing okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Go figure, right? So,
Breadwinners.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Which I find is very ironic, right? But so I never saw my dad and my mom together, right? My dad was around, but he wasn't around. Like he was a truck driver, so he was always he picked trucking. Like that's what he did. He lived in Cambridge or Mississauga. Like that's what he did. He was closer to my sister, who's 7 years older than I am, right? And that was fine. And I thought I was close to my mom, but there was just a lot of manipulation there. My dad, good guy, but just hands off,
yeah.
right? And even when I got into a situation where I became married and he has a grandson and all this stuff, like he did everything in his power not to be part of that. Like I'd be like, and I didn't want him to be a part of it. So this is my counselor and my wife saying, like, try to build that relationship with him. I'm like, I know how this is gonna end.
Yeah.
Like I know what's gonna happen, right? But I'm like, all right, you just have to see it for yourself. And once again, I gotta sacrifice
yeah,
myself to make this
yeah.
happen, right? So I tried, it didn't work to the point where like I cussed my dad left, right, up, down while I was outside one time, and my neighbor thought I was yelling at him and just went into the house and just slammed the door. And he's like, "Is everything okay? Did I do anything?" I'm like, "No, I was talking to my dad," because he was just being so ignorant, right?
Yeah.
And I never really understood why. But I think my sister, anyways, that's a whole other story. But now my dad is going through, he's having memory loss, and he's got early signs of dementia. And just a year and a half ago, like he had reached out to me because we're not that close. I gave up. I'm like, I'm done. Like I don't owe you anything. Like I'm self-made. You did nothing, right? And he called saying like, I don't know what I did, but I know I did something to you, and I'm so sorry, and I miss you. And the Dale who usually deals with him was like ready in the background. I'm like, just say something. Just say something,
Like-
right? I'm ready. Nothing. Like he literally is the first time in my life I ever saw my dad vulnerable, and scared, and nervous because he was like, I know I did something to destroy this relationship. I don't know what it is, but can we pretty much start over? And it took everything in my power, like my pride and everything, to accept the circumstances. And like I went to go visit him. I haven't seen him in years. He wants to see his grandchild, who he'd be so proud of, right? Like it hurt because he
Yeah.
chose not to be a part of it.
Exactly.
But now, because of where he's at, he's a completely different person. But he's the dad I always wanted him to be.
Yeah, exactly.
But it took dementia. Like, how do you? Like,
I know.
What? And you can't react the same way because then you're the.
Yeah, I
you
know.
what I'm saying?
I know.
Beep, right? Like, so you have to go in going, okay, like this is him. Like, I've never seen my dad like this. This is him trying to repent for whatever it is and trying to really heal multiple wounds over so many years. I'm like, okay. You know, and I talked to my family about it, and they were obviously on board with it. And my son, same thing, was just like, yeah, let's meet my grandfather. Last time he saw him, he was 1, right?
Damn.
But just, yeah, it's just funny how life works, man. Funny.
Like, yeah, 'cause, like, even with me, like, I remember when I was incarcerated, I had to basically write a letter to my dad.
Wow.
Like, just to, like, I basically poured out everything. I didn't leave anything, unspoken. I was just like, yo, if this is what it's going to be, then, like, where were you?
Yeah.
At least the times I was growing up. And it's very hard for a young person to grow up in a world where, society looks at you as less than a second-class citizen.
Yep.
They value their pets over a black human body. So, when you're at that stage is, the 17 to going into almost 21, like from 17 to 21, you really do need a real good father figure in your life.
Yeah.
Because that's where the strain of, you being that smiley person to you being a silent person that's now carrying a gun.
Yeah.
Because you were suffering so much in silence that you didn't want to share with somebody else to bring them down with you, that you kept it all inside. And then that one moment where the bottle has been shaken way too much and you explode, that's what the media puts a microscope on.
Yep.
And that to me is like a harsh reality of how, me as a young black person, trying to navigate this world and trying to realize like who's who, it really affects you. It affects your mental health. And then whenever, another child gets killed, they always say, oh, he was known to police. Taking the humanity, like the human side out of the child.
Yeah.
Okay, he was known to police, but known to police for what?
Yeah.
He could have been walking to the basketball court and the police stopped him. Like, that, all that falls under known to police. It doesn't mean that you committed a crime. It was just you're in the database system because maybe Cardin was around them time.
Yeah, the whole known to police thing I don't think is needed. I mean, especially when someone dies, like whatever the circumstances did. Like if it was something that they possibly brought onto themselves, whatever, but you think to yourself, how did that person get to that point?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Or this individual that did nothing. It baffles my mind, right? Like we forget, like you said, we forget about the human side of these individuals and how they got to where they were.
Exactly.
Right? You just feel like they were born. That's just what it was. No, like something happened or something didn't happen in their life for them to get to this point. And I find that, like, especially with a lot of the youth that we deal with, right? They, like, for gangs or going into gangs, like, they don't call them gangs, they call them family.
Exactly.
Like, police officers call them gangs, right? But when you see that gangs are investing so much more into our youth, giving them everything that they need, want, or think they need.
Exactly.
And the services are hands off, well, then where do you think they're going to go, right? Like, I have these group of individuals that is willing to give me anything and everything no one else wanted to give me, and you telling me to trust police officers that really aren't doing much for me,
Exactly.
right? Like, of course there's going to be an extreme imbalance there, right? Like, we have to give as much and then some. And I think that's why we're losing this whole situation with gangs having this hold on our youth and us just saying, what do we do? Well, we have to do more.
No,
We
100%.
have to do more, right? So,
So, like, do you think, like, your choice to becoming a police officer had, like, a negative effect on your relationships, like with your family or with your spouse, because maybe you're investigating something and you're taking that time away from your family, or do you know when to clock in and when to clock out?
okay, that last part. Okay, so
Sorry, it's a pretty heavy question.
no, that's I would say at first I would say it was really hard to balance everything else because, like I said, you're still in that state where you're trying to prove yourself to your fellow police officers, learn everything, stay out of trouble, do everything proper, try to be accepted, and then still be that same individual that people have known you to be for 32 years of your life, right? So I would say the balance in the first to 5 years was probably harder. But then when you recognize who you are and you become more established and you recognize the people that build up your circle, and those are the individuals that you deal with, and you stay away from individuals that really take away your identity. Like you kind of figure out, like policing to me is it's personnel management. And what I mean by that is you have to know how to navigate various personalities, ones that fit you, one that don't fit you, and you need a game plan or strategies to deal with everyone to make sure you are okay. So that's why I always say it's personnel management. If you can manage that and you are open to see who represents what to you and what works for you and what doesn't, you will succeed in this career, right? And I found that I've gotten that over the years. I know who to trust, and that goes to black officers, white officers, whatever, right? There are black officers I don't trust.
Yeah,
Right? Like it's just
not every
it's
skin
not,
folk is kinfolk.
well, and that's the thing, right? So it's just like you just find people like that build you up and for the right reasons, right? And some of my most influential, I guess, role models on this job have been other white officers, and not even officers that are older, just like officers that I see doing an incredible job saying, I want to be like that officer, right? So that's when it doesn't become about race. Like it comes about like knowing what your circle is and who should be in that circle and who should not be in that circle, and recognizing that not everyone's going to like you, and that's okay. I don't need everyone to like me. You don't like that I dance with youth? Okay, like thanks for putting me in your mind.
Yeah,
I don't know who you are, so I don't care. But it's that kind of stuff, right? And people will tend to not focus on the good work you do because they need to, in their head, say that you are something negative to make them feel better about themselves, right? So I would say now where I'm at, my son knows, despite I'm in an investigative role with bail compliance, he knows that I'm always trying to give youth resources because my phone goes off all the time with youth getting arrested at that time. They'll call me. What's your first phone call? Can I call Officer Swift?
I was like, what?
Which is huge, right?
Yeah,
Like they're
exactly.
saying, I can't call my parents, can't whatever. Let me call Officer Swift, and then I can talk to them, hopefully make the situation better for other officers or whatever, right? Just show them that support, right? So my phone is always going off, so I'm always on. So it's that whole knowing. So that balance thing is hard. Like if adults, and I'm sure some of you can attest to this. I get back to adults a lot slower than I get back to you.
Oh yeah,
right. Like
he's
it's
right.
if
He's right. He's definitely right. You know how many times I'm like, yo, Leia, like, can you get a hold of Swift? Because I can't. Like,
and
what do you mean? What number do you have? The same number as you?
But that's the ongoing joke, right? Is that, but if you're a youth, like if you literally change your voice and say you're somebody, I'll be like, hey, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And it's that whole, if you tell a youth that you're going to be there for them, you can't pick and choose when that opportunity is going to be.
Exactly.
Right? So my son sees that, my wife sees that, and my son appreciates that because he knows about all the evils out there, and he understands that he's in a privileged spot where he's got a lot of things that these youth don't have. And he'll come with me to certain events and meet youth that don't have as much as he does. And it's very humbling for him, and I think it's good for him to see that, right?
No,
and I will talk to him about the difficulties and stuff that I deal with certain youth because he's at that age now. He's almost 14. Oh, wow. He'll yeah, right? Like he'll understand that stuff. So now
pretty huge.
I'm in a spot where like I know what I'm about. I know I have my family to call me out if I get too exhausted or take on too much. I do whatever I can, but I love those quiet moments too, where I just shut down and no one can get a hold of me. Those moments, I need those moments to just calm my brain down because I'm always trying to solve everything, right? Like if someone's at work and they call, we need help with this, I'm like, oh, I'm on it, right? Yeah. Not for me to say I helped, but I'm like, if I have information or I have certain skills that can make your job easier and your life easier, I just feel that's what I should do, right?
And to touch on that program, could you like tell us a little bit more about what that program is?
Yeah, so it's a unit, not really a program. It's the bail compliance unit. And what I was telling you before this was that, so what we do is we check on individuals who have conditions, usually if they're on curfew or if they're on house arrest, and then we have to make sure that they're also not associated with individuals that they're not supposed to be, right? So we have to enforce their conditions to make sure that they are following them. If they are not in following them and we find them breaching their conditions, then we arrest them, bring them to the station. They're either arrested and released, or they're held for show cause, which means they go to court the next day. And that's typically what bail compliance is. What I know we're trying to do at 33 is, instead of just being reactive, we're trying to be proactive. So and this is more me mainly with youth, because sadly, a lot of the youth are the ones that are involved in a lot of our serious more crimes, like our more violent crimes, right? Or like theft of vehicle, homicide, shootings, stabbings, fights, assaults, robberies, you name it, right? So my huge focal point is our youth, and typically, from what I'm seeing in my position, is that the youth that are breaching, I mean, the people that are breaching their conditions are usually the youth, right? Because from what I found is they get arrested, they get these conditions, they accept them, they write it off, say yes, whatever, but they don't really either understand them, or their family doesn't understand them, or they make sure their family doesn't understand them.
It's like, what are you talking about? I'm not on house arrest.
Yeah.
I'll be back, mom. I'm going to the store.
I just have to reside here. I'm not on house arrest, and it's okay because a lot of some of the families don't speak English, so sometimes it's up to the kids or the adults. I mean, the youth that we've arrested to explain this to their parents. So what we try to do is get really familiar with the sureties, which are the people who are responsible for the individuals who are on conditions. Make sure we're in communication with them. Make sure we are in communication with the parents. Make sure that even with the youth, we know the schools they go to, so we know if they're going to school. See what they have set up at the school to help them be successful. I tell the youth to reach out to me anytime if they have any questions about court, or if they're looking for volunteer experiences, or any and everything, because I realize that a lot of the youth don't have those resources, and we just kind of expect them to abide by the conditions, not really recognizing what their house situation is. Like, they don't get along with their parents.
exactly.
Maybe there's so many different things that we just don't know, but we just expect them to just abide by these conditions because they messed up, right? All of us has messed up at some point and did something, right? And sadly, like I said, some of these situations the youth have got into have been really bad. But despite them being really bad, they need a lot of resources. So I try to reach out to organizations that are usually not affiliated with Toronto, like Toronto Police or policing, period, like more grassroots organizations to say, look, I have this kid who needs to find a psychologist, or needs to find a good lawyer, or needs a volunteer experience, or needs a job, right? So I have, over my career, built these relationships with these individuals to help these youth be more successful while they are going through the court system, while under conditions. There's times where I'll find out they have a CAS meeting, and I'll join. And it's just because I want to join, not because I have to. So my whole thing is being a part of every aspect of their life to see where they need those resources to make them more accountable, but more successful while going through the court system.
No, that's super important, because I know me, when I went through the court system, there wasn't anything like that around. And like, the court system, it either does two things for you. It either makes you a better criminal, or like it I don't know, it really, like, till this day, like, I'm still trying to fight being institutionalized and stuff like that, and because of the circumstances and the surroundings of people that you're around, and the way the correctional officers treat you, like, it's almost like you're punished before you're even found guilty.
Yeah.
And, that could leave somebody very jaded, especially when it comes to the system. And then you have the Crown attorneys, just like, to them, a victory is just another win. Like, they don't see, like, the effects it has on your family, the toll it's taking on your parents, the financial burdens. Yep. And it's funny because, like, when they did the Bell Let's Talk, there was people like, oh yeah, Bell, let's talk. Let's talk about how, like, all these accumulation bills that, I have to accept because my loved one's in prison, and he's trying to call his lawyer, and all these, things are taken from the phone. Like, you can't make three-way calls no more because the line automatically cuts out.
Yep.
And if you go on double dial, boom, there's a fight in jail. So guess what? Now you're in the hole. Like, there's so much things that, like, take into effect when somebody gets arrested that I think a lot of people don't really understand unless they're in that situation. And I think even, like, a lot of the mayors that have been Toronto mayors don't even understand that. Like, I definitely know the mayor before the one we had now did not understand that at all.
Right.
Like, to me, it's crazy. Like, you can't give somebody a mandatory minimum sentence. Like, that to me is wild. Like, okay, I get it. Some arrests, like, some convictions lead to a punishment. But the person's already punished himself. If you go into that person's household, you could tell this person, like, has nothing, and it's not the child's fault, but look at the surroundings and the neighborhood that the person's in.
Yeah.
Like, what things could he strive to be? Like, like you grow up, you don't really see a black officer, a black judge, a black lawyer, a black firefighter. Black teachers were like not even existent when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And then, fast forward to now, you do have black people in these roles, but some of them are not the black people you want in these roles. So it's a tough one. And, I give my hat off to anybody that goes into this role because I know the stress it takes. I don't know. It's a hard pill to swallow because you're almost between a rock and a hard place when you're trying to affect change and actually be the change you want to see. When there's a history of not letting you guys in,
Well, it's interesting you said. I think like a lot of us, like even major organizations and stuff like that, don't really understand the toll it takes on the family. I think we stay so focused on the individual who did the crime, we forget about how that has impacted the rest of their life, even the community and everything. And then this individual goes through the court system, and then they're out. Then we're like, okay, well, make yourself better than you were before.
Yeah, with a criminal record.
Yeah, with a criminal record. No one wants to be your reference.
Yep.
You already have things against you based on where you come from. Sometimes because of what your name is.
Yep.
Right? Like, I know a lot of youth that don't like putting down their address because they feel they're just going to be like just counted out from the second they see whatever.
It's like Chester Lee.
Or yeah, right? Or let me use my middle name, which is Michael.
Yeah.
Instead of, right?
No. Can't use Tayshaun.
Yeah, can't use Tayshaun, right? So I think that's the other thing too. And I think with me, a lot of the youth that I know are really trying to do better. I'm like, use me as a reference. I'm like, I'll be a reference for you. And just because they have nothing, right? So I'm like, I'll be a reference for you, but you got to show me you're putting in the work that you want to do something better. And then if you're showing me that and you're trying to better yourself, I'll be a reference for everything. I've been a reference for colleges, universities, explaining to these organizations like what this kid has gone through and where they are now and why they are a good fit for whatever it is that they want to do. But that's people putting themselves out there, and it shouldn't just be officers doing that. It should be any and everyone trying to uplift our youth because they are an integral part of our community and how our communities are seen and how we are moving forward.
So if I was a young kid and I came up to you like, hey, Dale, I want to be a police officer, what are the steps that you would be like, okay, this is what you have to do? Like these are your footprints for you to become.
I would, what would I say? I would say first of all, wait till you're older. Policing, like when I hear people getting into policing at 20, 21, 22, 23, I could never expect myself being a police officer 22, 23. That's way too much power, way too much authority, just way too much period for everything. And how do you internalize that and how do you deal with that with not even experiencing that stuff yourself, experiencing those things yourself in your own life, right? So I would say, I don't know, wait till you're 25, go to school, because they'll usually ask, like, what should I take at school? Should I take police foundations or anything with policing? I said, the best thing you do is to take something that has nothing to do with policing. I said, because they want to, now I know they love hiring people who have a balance, right? And have other interests beside policing. They figure those individuals are going to be really good coming into policing because they have different ways of thinking. They have different life experience, different lived experiences. That's what they want. So I'd say whatever you do, do well because they will look at your marks. So don't take something because you feel you have to. Take something because you're passionate about it and you know you can do well in it. So when your time comes up, no matter how competitive the field is to get into policing, you know you've got good marks. I would say volunteer work for sure because every service is looking for people who have volunteer work. I even tell them, like, if you're looking for volunteer work, let me know. I'll see if I can hook you up with different organizations to get you that if you don't have it, which is fine. I said, if you can, I would talk to someone like another officer, like a black officer or an officer that looks like yourself that has the years on that can talk you through certain things and let you know how certain things go and how to prepare for certain things. Because it is a little different being a racialized officer going to policing, right? So you want to have that proper mentor. and also realizing that, look, everyone messes up. Like, everyone's got things that they're not happy about, that they've done,
that they're
and
not proud of.
and don't be the second you feel that where you come from is
Like
detrimental to, if you like, you could have all these incredible things and you don't get in because it seems as if it's because of where you're from. I think that's something that they're like, no, that has nothing to do with it, nor should it, and that's up to the service as well to go. That should have no play in it. What are you doing? How have you been successful given the circumstances that you grew up in? Because you want officers who are resilient. You want officers who know what it's like to have to sacrifice, that have to grind, that have been in situations where they've had to navigate themselves, and with that maturity, that emotional intelligence, right? You want officers like that, right? So I say, when you come from these areas, personally, I think it should be something that puts you on the list right at the top, because you understand the communities that you are going to be involved with. And I hate saying communities that you're policing. I want to say communities that you're involved with. You'll understand them because you're from them.
Exactly.
You know if something is unsafe, or if it's safe, or if something's not a big issue, or how certain things are. Like, you have that understanding. So to me, that should be something that the second you say you're from an area, that should put you up here.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And then if you're from somewhere outside of Canada, and this is no disrespect to anyone coming into the service, but if I'm going, it's like this. If you have a degree compared to a diploma, or you have post-secondary education in high school, what goes up there? Post-secondary will get you in probably better than just having a high school. Having a university degree typically would say that's good instead of, say, college, whatever, because it's so competitive. I think that if you are from a neighborhood that you've had to grind, struggle, or whatever, that to me that's the PhD.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your post-secondary doctorate, right? Exactly. And then everything else, I think, is seen as less, because you want people who not only resemble those neighborhoods, but understand those neighborhoods. Does that make sense?
No, 100%. Does anybody in the audience have a question?
Well, these two, since they've been talking so much, I'm like trying to like...
What would you tell your younger self?
Yeah. So the question was, what would you tell your younger self?
About what?
About
Put you on the spot, eh?
that you would have wished you made to be better. I'm not saying that you're not better now, but like, of course, we always have that regret of like, I wish I did this differently, that I could be better at this or be better of this. What would you?
So changes you would have made, like you wish you were better than.
Because we have a lot of youth, I would say, that might have made a mistake, but don't know how to like overcome that. Even though they have resilience, they always still have that guilt in them,
Yep.
right? Or feel regrets, as in like, if I did this differently, or listen to my parents, or listen to this person, maybe I would accomplish this certain things better, right?
Yeah.
Like, in that sense, because we see a lot of youth that go through mistakes. It could be through peer pressure, social media, all these kind of stuff, but then don't know how to overcome that.
Yeah.
And they continue with that same lifestyle, wish they could have changed.
Yeah, no, it's the first things that come to my mind is recognize that everything you've been through has made you who you are. Sorry. The one thing I'd like to emphasize to the youth is that anything that you've been through, where you've grown up, your lived experiences make you who you are. And unfortunately and fortunately, those things are sometimes negative things and they're positive things. And it's really up to us and the people in your life that truly love you. And sometimes those individuals aren't family. Sometimes they're community members, community leaders, you name it, to foster those experiences and to make it into a whole individual, because everybody has made mistakes. Everybody has wished that they had done something differently. Everybody had wishes that they were born into a different situation. Everybody wishes that they were close to their father or their mom. There's all these things that we're like, I wish. I think it comes down to, it's you accepting who you are and recognizing that you're a unique individual that has these skills that can benefit many, many people around you. So instead of focusing on the things that didn't go right, focus on the things that make you who you are, that are going right. because like I said, there's always going to be things that you wish you did differently. But if you're living in the past, there's no way you can grow for the future and be that asset to the community that people need you to be, right? Because we get so stuck in our head because people are telling us that we can't be certain things, or what you did reflect is who you are. And no, that's not how life works, right? The reflection, it's stay true to yourself and recognizing that even though you made mistakes, some of the mistakes do not make up who you are, right? Your decisions moving forward and what you want to do with what you've learned, that is what makes you successful, and you will thrive in this community. That's what I would say. Someone's opinion about me is none of my damn business. That to me hits home hard because we're always comparing ourselves based on other people's beliefs of how we are, how we should be, what we should not be, and we forget about who we are, what makes us special, what makes us unique, because we're so worried about fitting into things that we shouldn't be fitting into. Realistically, I think people should be fitting into us, right? Yeah. So if you have an opinion about me that's not valid and you just want to have it, that's good. I don't need to know about it. Like, it's good. So it's being true to yourself despite what other people are thinking. And that's hard sometimes because sometimes you're not the most popular person. Sometimes you're the black sheep. But that's what makes you who you are, and that's why you'll be successful. And being that individual will influence other people to do the same and be themselves. So my big thing is people's opinions of you are none of your damn business. I love that quote because it's almost like having superpowers these days being an individual, right? Because we're always trying to find something to belong to. Always, like it's never enough. And that could be from social media or what people tell us, what people don't tell us. We're always trying to fit in somewhere. I think people should be fitting in with me. And that's not being cocky or whatever, but I'm like, let me set the narrative. And that's the other thing too, is the other narrative is never allow your circumstances or someone else to define who you are. It's not up to anyone else to define who you are. As hard as it is, no matter what is in front of you, you have to define who you are. That is the only way you'll be able to sleep at night, and that is the only way you'll be successful. That's it. Well, I would say definitely getting a mentor for sure, which is huge. Like having someone to talk to just about different questions or concerns you might have about getting into policing. It's good to talk to someone who was probably had the same questions you did when they were going through the process. So I would say that, because I'm talking about resources I think they need. TPS has their own stuff, but I think about being with a mentor who understands the circumstances you're in, getting them in contact with other organizations that are very youth focused and encouraging youth to be better versions of themselves despite circumstances. And that can go from multiple. There's so many youth groups that I'm connected to or know of that are doing a phenomenal job. Positive Vibes, Black Creek Initiative. Help me out here, guys.
BCCCC.
Right? I was gonna say Black Farmers of Canada.
Yeah, Black Farmers. Right?
There's what's that? Collective. Yep. See, sorry, there's all this stuff, right? And all these organizations that, sorry, I dropped the ball on that one huge. Yeah, right. And it's funny because I'm like, oh, they're there, and then when I have to say them out loud, I'm like, there's a lot, right? But it's those groups that I've really affiliated with. There's also groups through the city of Toronto. What's it called? Peace Builders, Strides. Oh my gosh, like there's so many that want to work with police officers in the hopes of making our youth successful despite the circumstances that they're in. And there are a lot of organizations that are willing to do that and want to do that. So I would definitely obviously talk to a lot of our community leaders and say, like, this is the kid I have, like, how can I help them? Because I don't have all the answers. The other thing is, be okay with saying you don't have all the answers, but saying I will contact somebody who will have the answer and I will get back to you. It's okay not knowing. So I'll talk to my fearless leaders here and say, like, I have this youth. What do you think? and they'll do the same, vice versa. We need them to talk to a positive role model that, you know, that can give them a good guideline on how to be successful in life. And we play off each other. All the different organizations and the individuals that are committed to this, they play off each other. It's everyone helping everyone, and with the same notion of helping our youth because they are our future.
So as a police officer, how do you keep in shape? Because you see some police officers, you're like, man, he could barely get out of his car. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, that's true. That is true. That is true. For me, it's I've always been athletic my whole life. I've also had like 8 different knee surgeries. So I've had knee surgery after knee surgery just from different sports, basketball, you name it. One of the things I've really always held dear was I never wanted to be a liability in a safety situation where my counterpart or my partner or other officers needed my help and I couldn't do it because I physically was not able to. So I've never used my surgeries and everything as an excuse. I'm like, you have a surgery, you get better. You do the physio, you do the work to get back into it, because there's going to be people who are going to depend on you when you are out there to help keep them safe. And not just your partners, but also community members, right? For me, it is, my body's my temple. I love to eat, don't get me wrong, right? But I have a responsibility to stay in good shape to make sure I can keep other people safe. And that's how I've always seen it from the beginning. And that's kind of pushed into you, like, or like that's really emphasized to you when you get onto this job, is staying, like, you know, safety, hands-on stuff, whatever. And I've always said, if I'm in better shape, but also mentally healthy, which is the main thing, it's your mental health. Physical health, that's great. Your mental health, if you are good mentally, then sometimes you don't even have to worry about that. Mental health and that perspective helps you deal with situations without getting physical, right? And my son, who's 14, who keeps flexing in front of me, and he's like, Dad, I joined the after school gym club. What can you bench? I'm like, I could bench you and then some, right? But it's that you also want to be a good role model for your own kids as well, right? So that's with me. So it's making sure people stay safe, feeling better about myself, confidence, like knowing that I've had so many different issues with knees, and I've still able to kind of keep it on point and then some. That's a pride thing for me, for sure, 100%.
And I have one more question. What do you think we need to do as like a community to help reduce gun violence in the neighborhood?
That's really hard, because I think a lot of individuals do, but I think I think there's a lot of fear. I think that whole snitching, or I can't say anything because, or, oh, I want to say something, but that youth's a good individual, and you know, so I want to protect them despite him or her did something to someone else more than once or twice or whatever. I think it's communities coming together to sometimes to protect yourself and to grow as a community. You have to make those hard decisions, which means that you have to communicate to us or our officers you trust and say, this is what's going on. We need your help. We know what's going on here, and looking for help. So looking for help, I think at the same time too, if our youth getting in trouble, not ostracizing our youth, right? Because sometimes I'll see communities when youth get in trouble, their parents or family want nothing to do with them, and then they're just roaming around, and that's when like our community individuals and community leaders have to come in and take them under their wing. And then they call me too to just have that extra, resource or role model. So I think it's taking ownership of your community, which means making those tough decisions. Not ostracizing the youth that make mistakes, because they're making mistakes for a reason. Figure out what that is, which that also means that you have to look within yourself and say, what are you not doing? Instead of saying, you did this, so that's why, no, what did you do? Because I guarantee you had some part to play in that as well. So it's putting your pride aside to go, where did I fail this young individual? Or where did I fail this person? Where could have I been better? I think if we strive to be better versions of ourselves in our communities, that's when we're going to be able to help the individuals in our communities, and stop letting gangs and certain individuals manipulate our youth, because we know what's happening and we know who's doing it, right? And nothing good ever comes of it. So it's got us, like, we can't investigate anything if we don't have the support of the communities. If we have no relationships, we can't solve stuff, right? We're not always that smart, right? Like, but what I mean by that is like, it's not like this happened, we know who it is. Unless the community is willing to help, to work with us or assist us with us, we can't get anywhere. So it's that open communication, bridging that gap for sure, building that relationship organically first, not through investigations, not just when we need something, but being around, making yourself a part of that community so people will know that they can trust you moving forward. I can trust Swift with this information because I know he'll protect me, or I know he'll do something really well with this, and I know he's not judging these individuals, and that he'll do whatever he can to make sure him or her gets something fair and is dealt with and gets the help that they need.
I'd like you to wrap it up with a quote.
Oh, man. Quote?
Quote of the day.
I can't even wrap it up with a quote. I don't know. I just really, all I can really say is just always strive to just be a better version of yourself, knowing that you're not perfect. No one is perfect. There's not an individual in this world that is perfect. And I'd say some of our most successful individuals in this world are people who have past that they're probably not happy with, right? Because that creates a lot of resilience. And remember, strength from vulnerability. You get strength from being vulnerable. Trust me on that aspect. Make sure you are allowed to feel vulnerable. Put yourselves in situations where you can be vulnerable. Really, just be yourself. Be yourself, please. That's it. I don't know what kind of quote else besides someone else's opinion of you is none of your damn business. That's it.
All right, that's a wrap.
Wrap.